Hi, I'm Martin Albrechtsen.
Hi guys, I'm 𝘤𝘰𝘰𝘶𝘳.
Hi, I'm Darren Carter.
You're listening to the Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. So it was back-to-back 2-0 league defeats to Sheffield United on Wednesday night as any hope of Albion's remaining playoff push seemed to plunge into uncertainty. Welcome back to the Baggies Podcast. Today we're joined by ITV's investigations correspondent and massive Albion fan. It's the brilliant Daniel Hewitt. Dan, how are you? Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back. Yeah, thank you. Night after another defeat. I think I only ever talked to you after we've lost, so I don't know whether that's you being cruel or me being sadistic, but there you go.
Yeah, and I mean, talking about sort of last time you were on, well, first of all, you've got a different role at ITV by the sounds of things. You were political correspondent and now you're investigation correspondent. What's the difference between those two things and what are you doing now, basically?
Yeah, change of job. I worked in Westminster doing politics for quite a while, and I started doing a kind of housing investigation a couple of years ago, which really kind of felt really fulfilling. And as a result of that, ITV decided to create a new role, looking kind of solely on kind of long-term project investigations. And so, good commitment from ITV News to kind of give me this role and get us kind of digging around into more long-term stories, more impactful stories, rather than the day-to-day sort of politics. And while I'm here, I've got a documentary out on Sunday the 30th of April at 10:20 p.m. on ITV, Life and Debt. So if you are interested in what I do, we have a documentary out on Sunday. I thought I'd get that plug in early, Lewis. Sorry.
Early plug. And I mean, you're fresh from an appearance on Good Morning Britain as well this morning as well. You've had an early start.
Yes, this is the highlight of my day, though. Like, Good Morning Britain was just the warm-up for the Baggies Podcast.
That's what we love to hear. But, I mean, in terms of West Brom, last time you were on here, you came on after a 0-0 draw at Coventry. Steve Bruce was still the manager. We were kind of sort of ebbing into the end of the season, I'd say, as kind of petering out. We were playing I think we had, run of games, Coventry, Barnsley, Blackpool. They were sort of the end. That was the end of the season. It was quite a favourable run-in, but for a team with nothing to play for, it wasn't very helpful for us because we just kind of wanted the season to disappear. I mean, are things better or worse since you last came on the show, Dan, would you say?
I think on the pitch, better.
Mm-hmm.
Worse. Yeah. Depends which one you want to go on. But on the pitch, I think Carlos Corberán is a really smart manager. Obviously, when Steve Bruce departed, we were in a real pickle, and I went to Millwall away, and we lost quite late on. I think we lost 2-1 at Millwall quite last minute, and I remember just kind of seeing the players, kind of their response to the equaliser, and just this inevitability about Millwall scoring. And that was in November, and I just came away from that game thinking this team's going to get relegated. I was slightly convinced of that because the squad looked pretty thin, good enough to stay in the Championship, but just felt like it had lost all its kind of character and drive. And I actually thought, if we are talking with 2 games to go, to you on this podcast, I thought we'd be talking about whether we're going to stay in the league or not. So the fact that we're still, as we speak, in the hunt for a playoff place with 2 games to go, given we were 23rd in November just before the World Cup, and I genuinely felt like we were doomed, I'll take that. Off the pitch, completely different story and maybe a different podcast. But on the pitch, I think we are in a better place than we were a year ago.
Yeah, and I think in terms of that, at least we've got something to play for at this end of the season. I think that at least keeps a bit of an interest for a lot of Albion fans. I'm sure me and you particularly, Dan, because, as we've talked about in the past, I think, the line that you came out with, I think maybe a couple of times that you've been on here, is you just want to see us win is kind of your mantra, I'll say. But yeah, I think at least we've had a little bit of that under Corberán so far. And I suppose he's, in terms of perspective, I think maybe it's needed a little bit here, because obviously I've seen plenty of people on social media saying bottled it, we're out, it's been an awful sort of season. But I think from where we were, as you say, to where we are now, I think we've come a long way from the side that looked to be fighting relegation come the end of the season back in, say, October time.
Yeah, I just don't buy this kind of bottling it narrative at all. I think the team under Corberán has shown an incredible amount of character to come back from, I thought, kind of the brink of relegation in sort of in November to where we are now. And I think what's happened in the last few weeks is the injuries have really not helped. The squad is incredibly thin. You look at the starting 11 at Sheffield United, I think five or at least five, maybe six of those players that started the game you would not have expected to start at the start of the season. And you go 1-0 down to Sheffield United and there is just nothing on the bench to bring on by way of a striker, certainly, but also kind of in just creatively in midfield. Like there's just 𝘤𝘰𝘶𝘳 and Phillips being out is a big loss. I think Phillips in particular had started playing really well under Corberán. I just don't buy it. I don't think the last few games we've seen a lack of effort, and I don't think we've seen a lack of character. I don't think we've seen a lack of drive. Yeah. I think it's a lack of quality. And Corberán, I think, has squeezed every last bit of quality out of this squad to get them out of the relegation zone in this position. And look, we lost last night to a good team. That they are absolutely the second best team in this league. Yeah. They absolutely deserve to get promoted. The minute they went 1-0 up, it was clearly not. We weren't going to get back in the game. I couldn't see where we were going to get a goal from. Last night was a bonus. It was, if we'd have got a point or a win, that would have been a bonus. The reality is, we are playing, I think, two pretty poor sides in Norwich and Swansea. I think if we win those two games, which I think we can, I think we get in the playoffs. But I don't think if we don't, it's been a failure on Corberán's part. I mean, it's been a failure as the size of our club. We should not be in the situation we're in. But that is nothing, I don't think, to do with Carlos Corberán, who I think has done a remarkable job. And I just don't buy this narrative that they've bottled it and that they're not trying. I just don't buy that at all.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think, I think Corberán, I think, you've sort of touched on it. I think he's probably taken this collective group of players as far as he can, maybe with regards to getting them into a playoff race. And I think we'd have probably settled looking back at October, we'd have probably settled for where we finished last season, which I think was 12th. So I think in terms of squeezing every last pip, as you said, out of this squad, I think Carlos Corberán has done that. I mean, if we nod to sort of last night, which was obviously disappointing defeat, as you say, it was probably a bit of a bonus. If we came out with a point, came out of 3 points, that would have been fantastic. I mean, you'd rock yourself right back into sixth position. It had been in your hands, in our hands, really, for the remaining two games. But I mean, my qualm really with as you mentioned there, the lack of quality. You look at Sheffield United's first goal. Obviously, it's a big mistake from 𝘤𝘰𝘶𝘳 to kind of play 𝘤𝘰𝘶𝘳 through it on goal, which is obviously not what you want when we're sort of clutching on to get a point at Bramall Lane. But the point I made at the time, I think I've said it on Twitter, is I don't think Albion score that goal in that, from where Sheffield United scored that first goal. I think the quality in Albion's front line, I think we'd pick up the possession from say a dodgy back pass, but I don't think we'd have the sort of quality to pick a goal out of that sort of situation. I don't know what you think about that, Dan, but I think we'd struggle in that kind of opportunity, even if it was gifted to us in the way we gifted possession to Sheffield.
I think you're right, and in the first half, I think that happened 2 or 3, not as blatant, not as kind of moronic as what 𝘤𝘰𝘶𝘳 did, but there was 2 or 3 times in the first half, and I thought we had a really good half an hour where we found ourselves sort of 3-on-2 or 4-on-3, where the Sheffield United were quite sloppy in possession. We found ourselves kind of at least kind of matching them for numbers going forward, and we just didn't have that clinical edge to slip someone in or get a shot out. I mean, look, in the first few minutes, Karlan Grant should score for me. That chance he had, I know it kind of fell to him quite awkwardly, but I still think a good striker kind of finishes that off, like gobbles that up. And as I say, I think we played some decent football, and that's been the story of our season at times. I think we've played nice football and we've done okay. I have to say, apart from the last 4 or 5 games under Steve Bruce, we played some really nice stuff at the start of the season. We've done decent victories. My honest view is that if Steve Bruce had started the season with Alex Palmer in goal, I think he'd still be our manager. I mean, I honestly don't. Look, I'm not a Steve Bruce apologist by any stretch, but I think part of the problem with Bruce was he just kind of stuck with I think, the worst goalkeeper at West Brom I've seen in my lifetime by some considerable way in David Button. I mean, I was at Birmingham when we lost 2-0. I mean, that game, I mean, he didn't want to be on the pitch. I mean, it was kind of unbelievable. It is the single worst goalkeeping performance I have ever seen. And they should have taken him off at half time. But anyway, aside from that, I agree with you. I think we played some nice stuff, but just the lack of quality and the minute we spoke about just before we came on, the moment we went 1-0 down, he had 2-0, 3-0 written all over it. I just didn't see where that goal was going to come from. And as I say, you look at the bench and who's Corberán going to bring on? I mean, I thought, for what it's worth, I thought he was right to start Taylor Gardner-Hickman. I actually think he's been playing quite well when he's come on. I like his drive. I like the fact that he's a bit of a wind-up. He leaves a foot in and he shoves a player. And I like that. The squad lacks a bit of bite and a bit of character, and I think he brings that. But it was just a kind of such a soft error. And I'm not sure who he was thinking he was trying to pass to. And I think if he doesn't make that error, we maybe hang on for a draw. But in the grand scheme of things, a point doesn't make much difference. I still think we have to probably win the 2 games remaining to get into the playoffs anyway. And look, even if we get into we can maybe discuss that. I mean, even if we get into the playoffs, I think we've got a big ask to overcome Luton and Middlesbrough, who I think are the 2 next best teams in the league. And look, God forbid we get promoted. I mean, what would we do then? because I don't know about you, I'm struggling to see beyond maybe your 𝘤𝘰𝘶𝘨𝘰𝘸, maybe the goalkeeper, maybe O'Shea.
You'd have to buy 25 new players, I think, Dan, if we got it.
It's a Nottingham Forest job without the money. So I mean, the only advantage to promotion is it'd be quite fun at the time, and we'd then get the financial security for a while of the money from the Premier League and Sky and the parachute payments. But actually getting promoted, I mean, it'd be a pretty miserable season, I think, next year.
Yeah, I think the main bonus, I think the only reason a lot of Albion fans, apart from just to say we're a Premier League club again, which I think seems a long time away for us, I think, at the moment. But I think just to say you're a Premier League club again, to get the money in, and to hopefully, attract a possible, buyer to potentially tempt the owner away from the club. I think those are kind of the 3 big points of possible promotion. On the pitch, it would probably be a disaster. I mean, and for Corberán, I suppose it's good for him to be able to manage in the Premier League, because he's clearly shown the aptitude to manage, at a higher level, and he's clearly a fantastic coach. So that would be a good opportunity for him. But with the players that we've got, I think, as you say, it would be a rebuild just without the building bit, because we wouldn't be able to spend very much money. But I mean, last night's defeat at Sheffield United, I think, for me, there was a little bit of a reluctance for Albion's players to kind of take the ball on and try and take a bit of responsibility, I think, maybe is what I'd say. I think there were opportunities, as you say, that we got 3-on-2 and we had some really good chances with the ball, and it seemed a little bit sort of like, no, you have the ball, now I'll pass it to you and you can try and make something of it. It didn't seem like anyone was kind of like, no, I'll have the ball, I'll take them on, I'll see what I can do with it. It seemed a little bit of like a pass in the buck along the line and seeing whether somebody would make something of it, but it kind of seemed like they looked like passing it along the line and trying to make something happen that way.
It was quite a tentative performance, I agree, and that's why, as I say, apart from the obvious error, I actually quite like what I quite like about Gardner-Hickman is that he does kind of drive for the ball. He's happy. He's willing to have a bit of his goal at Reading earlier in the season. He's willing to kind of take a shot from 30 yards, and in this league, if it's on target, it's got a chance. I agree, but I come back to it. I think part of it's a lack of confidence. I don't think they're full of confidence at the moment. They've sort of stumbled themselves into this position where they might have a shot at the playoffs. But let's be absolutely clear about this. We're not in with a shout for the playoffs with 2 games to go because of anything we've done. It's because the teams who've had their destiny in their own hands, Blackburn and Millwall, have completely capitulated because they're shite. I mean, that's the thing you have to remember. Like, the league is rubbish. I mean, it's a poor league. There is going to be 2 out of that 4 in the playoffs are going to be poor football teams, and we may be one of them. But I think you have to sort of take a step back here and say, have we bottled it, or is the reality that everyone else around us has bottled it and we've somehow managed to sort of stay in the mix? Because that's how it feels. It's like, who doesn't want to make the playoffs rather than who does? I mean, Preston, who are just no good at all, and I've got mates from my time up living in Manchester. I've got quite a few mates who are Preston fans. I mean, they're on the same points as us and they're still in the race for a playoff place. I mean, their form is absolutely dreadful. I mean, it's relegation form and they're still in with a shout. So, yes, I'm not. Everything about. If you'd have said to me yesterday, if we'd have done this podcast this time yesterday, and you said like, give me a prediction for tomorrow night at Sheffield United, I'd have said, I think we'll play pretty well, but we'll lose 2-0.
Yeah,
and that's what happened. And I'm not being an oracle. I think that's a pretty fair assessment of where we are. I think we put up a bit of a fight. I think we've got some decent players. I think we can hold ourselves, hold our own for a while. But when we asked to produce that little bit of quality and that little bit of class, and like you say, Sheffield United didn't have a sniff, and then they took 2 champions and won 2-0, and that's why they're in the Premier League next season. We're almost certainly not. But my worry next season is kind of just, I mean, look, we probably haven't got time to go into it now, but the stuff off the pitch feels so uncertain. I mean, on the one hand, Corberán has signed this new contract and quite a generous contract, and clearly doesn't feel like the club is so much of a basket case that he kind of jumped ship at the first opportunity, which we all thought he would do when Leeds came along, and he didn't. So obviously he's been told something. I don't know whether that bank loan we got was kind of like, look, we're just kind of betting the ranch on this bank loan, and we're going to take that and have one last run at it.
Yeah.
And if we make it, great. If we don't, well, we're in a whole world of pain. The squad needs a rebuild in Corberán's image, which requires money, and I'm not sure he's going to get it. So I'm really interested to see, because I think we have one of the brightest, most talented young managers in football, who's currently in charge of one of the most chaotic, badly run football clubs, with half a squad that has great potential and the other half which is no good. And so it's such a strange time.
Yeah.
I think if we had a poorer manager, I would be really worried. Corberán's, I think, our last hope of salvaging our club. There is a lot of weight on his shoulders, a very young, still quite inexperienced manager. But from what I've seen so far and the way he's got, like you said, squeeze every pip out of it, I'm confident we can have a run next season. My concern would be 3 of the teams that come down are going to be pretty good teams. That relegation battle is going to involve potentially. I mean, Forest winning last night, suddenly they're potentially back. You might have Everton, you might have Leeds, you might have Leicester. I mean, there's going to be 2 of that 3 are going to be a big club with money and some players. So you're already thinking, right, next season that top 2 might be hard to get into even now. So but the defeat at Sheffield United felt inevitable, and I don't think we should be too concerned or surprised by it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right about next season with the teams coming down. I mean, there will be massive teams. Whoever sort of that 5 or 6 end up in the Championship, you're going to struggle to get in the automatic promotion spaces you'd expect. I mean, if you are Carlos Corberán, Dan, if you were him, you know, you've done really well at West Brom. You've done a fantastic job to get them out of relegation. I'd say your stock's maybe not as high as it was a few months ago when you were on that massive winning streak. I think maybe that's probably down to the players rather than him. But if you're him, do you stay this summer? Do you stay and see the next season out, or at least see the summer out and see what happens when you get to next season?
It'd be quite strange of him not to, given he had like an out, or it seemingly had an out and chose not to take it. I mean, obviously they'll sit down in May, June and have the conversation about kind of what's available to spend, what can we do. Like obviously he's had a good 7-8 months with the squad by the summer to kind of assess who he thinks is kind of in his plans and who's not. He's effectively been handed a squad he had no control over and told to do what he can with it. I don't know the ins and outs, and I think we are in such a shambolic state behind the scenes that I wouldn't rule anything out. It's quite odd for him not to see him or see at least the start of next season and see what he can do if he's given a bit of money and a bit of time to rebuild the squad. It'd be interesting to see, because as I say, he hasn't really been given at any point a full squad to say, right, this is my 11. When he did have that in that sort of sweet spot around December, January, we really saw like a kind of identity. And I was saying earlier, that period where we had DK and Thomas Asante fit, where he was clearly had like a kind of, he'd start one and then bring the other one on, and that dynamic worked really well. Of Asante would like knacker them out, and then 𝘠𝘠𝘠𝘠 would come on and bully them, or vice versa. And then that, he felt like he had a real logic. I mean, the one time I've not been a huge fan of him tactically is when he's tried 𝘵𝘠𝘰𝘶𝘶 down the middle.
Yeah, that was strange. That was a very strange period of time.
He's a very old-fashioned kind of winger. Gets the byline. He causes teams. And down the middle, he looked lost. And he tried that in a 2 or 3 games. I didn't quite understand what he was trying with that. But clearly, he was just trying to see he was looking at the squad sort of mid-season and seeing who fit where. And I'll be interested to see. I mean, look, I think defensively we need. I think he needs a whole new back four. Yeah. I think Townsend. I know. I see people on Twitter talk about stats show he's a good player. I just don't see it. I think Furlong's a trier, but he's incredibly inconsistent. And then centre back wise, we just need 𝘺𝘰𝘶𝘳. I like. Yeah. I think he needs a proper partner. And then up front, I mean, 𝘠𝘠𝘠, I think we can just write off now. Sadly, I feel incredibly sorry for him, but I don't think he's going to have a career with us or even maybe a career in football. And Thomas Asante's a trier, but again, it's not they're going to lead the line. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what identity he brings and what players he brings in and what he does. I hope he has the chance to do that, and I hope he has the kind of commitment to the club to do it. But I wouldn't blame him for a second if he chose to jump ship. But I don't think he will. No. I don't know. I think it'd be odd to sign a new contract and then leave. Yeah,
I feel like he'll have. I feel like he'll have a very similar squad come next season. If I'm honest, it may well be padded out by those infamous free agents that Albion seem to like picking up. But just to round off, Dan, obviously Norwich City, Swansea City coming up next. Playoff place, do you think Albion will do it? Or do you think it's going to be more disappointment?
It's a really hard one to answer because my instincts are screaming no. because we just feel like every opportunity in this last few weeks we've had a chance to kind of put a run together. We've not done it. That said, like Norwich and are in a similar position to us. Like psychologically, they're very damaged. They're in a very sort of similar mental state to us, and I think they've been even worse than us in the sense that they started off in those places and have dropped. So psychologically, they're not in a particularly great place. And Swansea are no good. So I can see us losing both the games. I can see us winning both those games, and that's where we are really, isn't it? I just didn't see us going to Stoke and winning, and we did. Yeah. I didn't see us going to Rotherham and losing, and we did. I just don't know. I don't think the result at Sunderland and Sheffield United, as disappointing, as crushing as they are, I don't think it matters. I think if you put back-to-back wins together in these next 2 games, I think you get in the playoffs. So I don't see Coventry or Sunderland doing that. Yeah. So I think if you do that, you're there. Your guess is as good as. What do you think?
You just don't know what Albion's going to turn up. You know, as you say, that Stoke game could have won, could have come out. We obviously came out with a win, but we could have ended up losing 4 or 5-0. You know, that it's a very Albion thing to do. But Dan, we'll let you go. Thanks so much for joining us on this episode of the Baggies Podcast. Do you just want to give us a final plug to your documentary? Remind us when that's on.
Thank you. Yes, it's called Life and Debt: Stories from the Edge, and it's on ITV on Sunday. And if people are listening back after Sunday the 30th of April, and ITV1 at 10:20 p.m. And it'll be on after our defeat/draw/victory over Norwich.
There we go.
So you can delete where appropriate. Thank you.
Dan, thank you very much for joining us. That's Dan Hewitt, ITV's investigations correspondent. Thank you so much for listening to the Baggies Podcast this week. We really appreciate you giving up your time to listen to us, and hopefully Albion can end the season with whatever they end up with, but hopefully it's with a playoff place and we can enjoy at least a couple of games left of the season. But thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.